Good evening. I'm just pausing my screen and welcome to this, the 9th podcast from the South African Equestrian Federation. My name is Georgie Roberts, and tonight we are going to be talking about something that I think is perhaps one of the only unifying elements of the equestrian industry, and that is our mutual loathing for flying insects and the distress that they cause our horses and by proxy us. Tonight in studio, we have our two guests, our pest control expert, Neil Laubscher, you just told me, and Dr. Ross Hendry joining us again as our veterinary expert to talk about disease. So anyone wanting to focus on how to ideally control your pests this summer and keep your horses safe, this is the podcast for you. Thank you both for joining me here tonight.
Thanks, Georgie. Good to be here.
Thank you.
So, first of all, and our veterinary expert can pop in here, do all flying insects cause diseases generally? Like how much of it is like mental distress, to be honest? I mean, they're very irritating.
So flying insects, or vector-borne diseases as we call them, there's so many diseases transmitted by insects. So definitely, if you can eliminate the insects from your yard, you can eliminate a large number of fatal diseases. So a lot of the insects do cause diseases, and we'll go through all of them. But look, I'm not saying every single flying insect like a cicada or some of your, other like wasps and things, they're not going to cause any specific diseases. But your flies, your midges, your mosquitoes, they can certainly, and your ticks, they certainly can transmit diseases.
Do ticks fly, Ross?
Okay, but they're still very important in terms of disease.
Totally. I was concerned for a second. I thought, I've really missed something here in my life.
Insects have like evolutionarily, they've with animals, they've have this relationship where the diseases have used them as vectors to transmit. So over millennia, that's
you remind me of, I don't know if you've seen that meme. It says everyone's brave about the cockroach until they find out it has wings. And that would be horrifying. Okay, so Neil, I think the interesting starting point is, what are the different ways that we can use to control insect pests?
Okay, I think the biggest problem on an equestrian yard is flies. So because they are actually quite a big vector to pathogens and so on. So
and also they're really irritating. You walk into a yard and you get this plague of flies just flying at you.
No, definitely. My wife, there's 3 flies in the house and she's like, die vleerder ons weg.
We must move now.
Move and listen, what are you doing? You're working with all these stuff. Why do we have flies?
Why do we have 3 flies?
Yeah. So I think the biggest.
I'm starting to think we should have gotten another expert, Neil. 3 flies is 3 too many.
All right. I think the biggest thing that we need to understand is that flies always will be with us, and the amount that you can control. And there's certain methods that you can do this quite effectively. But I think we need to understand the fly life cycle for us to effectively control flies. And I think most of the people living in, like in the States and all those type of things, they're not too sure on what this life cycle looks like.
Well, it's weird because some of the yards that you'll go to, there'll be no flies whatsoever. And then there's always the same yards that have fly problems, they're just infested with flies. And I don't know what the factors are like that will contribute towards an increased number of flies within your population.
Do you see a common denominator between the yards?
To me, it's yards that are closely surrounded by water. So water and yards that have a large number of horses, because there seems to be a lot of manure around. And these yards are top yards, and they spend all day trying to control these flies, and sometimes the environment is just against you.
I think something that we've seen, especially in the pig and poultry industry in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks almost, with this heat that we've had. So we've had all this heat, but not a lot of rain or moisture. I've seen obviously the past 3 days there's been a bit of moisture in the air. But it started off with a bang. I mean, we literally had no.
So is heat the primary thing that brings on the?
Heat is one of the factors. I think the time of year, it's actually quite interesting and to see how it's like they've got a biological clock. End of from middle August till end of August, beginning of September, and all of a sudden you get this boom because the heat, especially this year, we had no a spring really.
Yeah, so it just went straight into summer. It was horrifying.
Yeah. So, and I think we're all like, listen, what just happened type of thing.
I'm very nervous for February.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the biggest factors. The heat and the time of the year then you get that fly boom.
Also with the midges as well, it's almost when those rains hit and you have the heat and that environment is just primed,
It's like a theme box.
It just, then you get this population explode and then you get this exponential growth, right? Yes. Because, I mean, in the beginning and with the environment, especially you have a lot of horses around, you have a lot of manure around, and then that manure starts getting wet. Because I suppose when it's and you get that warmth coming through, then you just have one fly turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 16, etc.
Spoke before we started. Well, back in the day, and I'm not going to say how old I am, but when buying a little chappy, then you open the paper and then there's a did you know. So this is a did you know.
A chappy paper knowledge.
Yes, yeah. So a fly in its lifespan of more or less 28 days, if you don't use insecticides, can lay about 500 eggs, and they lay them within 75 to 150
500 eggs.
Yeah, batches of 75 to 150 eggs. And within the winter, what happens is that they lay the eggs. A lot of people think that the fly population gets less in the winter, but it's just because their life cycle just becomes longer.
So are you telling me flies are basically, like in layman's terms, hibernating?
Yes.
This is horrifying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they lay their eggs in a cluster.
Okay.
And that cluster can actually go through the winter. The eggs on the outside will obviously die off of the cold and so on. But the eggs that's inside of the cluster, they just hibernate.
So pest control has to happen through winter as well, essentially.
To an extent, yes.
Okay.
But obviously it becomes less. So the management of your manure, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, is also still important within the winter as well. So the reason why we get this big boom of flies within when the summer starts is because of that hibernating eggs. All of a sudden,
they've stored.
The environment is primed, and then all of them just.
I didn't know that. That's actually crazy.
That's also because I always wondered, how do the diseases go from one cycle to the next, right? Because if you assume that all the midges, etc., have died out, and then all the flies have died out, how do they go? Because they generally pick the diseases up from your host animal, like let's say like AHS or Habronema or whatever you have. They pick it up and then they kind of harbor. So they're like basically keeping that over the cold period of time, and then they're coming back up and they're reinfecting the naive animals. So, I mean, that's how the cycle is maintained. So it's quite interesting that they stay kind of hidden there. So, it's quite interesting.
So, Neil, will you take us through what the life cycle is actually?
Yeah. So let's start in the winter time. So the life cycle, obviously, with a fly, it lays its egg. Out of the egg, then you get your 3 larval stages, L1, 2, and 3. And then the last larval stage then pupates. And then out of the pupa comes the adult fly again. So a lot of people also think that you get a baby fly and it eats and then it grows and then becomes this humongous predator type thing. So no, but that doesn't happen.
Those stupid people, I don't know who would think that.
Massive maggots.
Yeah. So I think... it's just another species of fly.
Okay.
So the size that it comes out of the pupa.
How many species of fly are there?
Lots.
Okay.
Which is the one that goes into the wounds, that you often see these massive necrotic wounds with these maggots.
So the IC, It's the fly that I don't know what its proper name is, but in Afrikaans we call it spijkerworm, né?
Yeah.
So it's actually the fly that lays its egg on the animal, and as soon as the larvae comes out of the egg, and it actually starts boring into.
That's
So
what we were talking about, the mango.
That's a mango fly,
Yeah,
but
okay.
but there's other flies that so there's Gedulstia. I've seen Gedulstia is also quite interesting. Actually, it's around here. I've seen it at a few yards, and they have the flies lay eggs on the eyes.
Yeah.
So and then you look in the eyes. They start off with an ulcer, and then you look and you'll see little like pinpricked white little larvae that's actually in the eye. I get very irritated, and then you put some ivermectin in the eye or whatever you treat with, and then the eye gets way worse after that because the larvae die, and then it starts ulcerating. And weirdly enough, at like very specific yards, so there's one around here, and then there's another yard closer to the West Strand, but only at those 2 yards I saw.
Sure.
So it's very specific around lots of water again. Strange.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, sorry. So you've got, and then the fly hatches.
Yeah.
And,
So then
and how long does that take? That whole.
So within winter time, that can be up to 28 days to a month. You can say a month. In summertime, that shortens to between 3 and the books say between 7 and 14 days, but I've seen it 3 to 7 days.
Jeez.
So if you've got one fly laying eggs,
You could have 500 flies in 3 days.
in 3 to 7 days,
Okay.
and then those hatch, and then they lay 500 eggs. So it's quite exponential. So within a month, you're sitting with
awful.
4 billion flies.
Yeah, I think someone can do the math on that and actually see how many flies
terrible.
there are, massive amount.
Okay. And then what's the best stage? Because obviously, kind of by the time you've got 5 billion flies, you're shutting the door effectively after the horse is bolted, to coin a phrase. What's the best stage to be tackling, or does it depend on the method you're using?
I think the biggest thing that we've spoken about before we started was that everything starts with manure management. So the ratio of flies that you kill to the flies that breed out are 1 to 4. So for every fly that you kill, 4 breeds out. So so that puts you into a in a 20-80% type of bracket. So 20% is the flies that you see. 80% is still in manure form. So that'll be eggs, larvae, and pupa. So most of the time, a lot of people take 80% of their resources towards 20% of the
That's a good way
problem.
of looking at it. Okay.
So we need to actually reverse that. So that's why dry manure and a good manure management regime is probably the best fly control that you can do.
Yeah, like we were talking about the deep litter system, and like I know it's very controversial, and I think deep litter systems can work when done right. But I often see that when you go to a yard, generally large yards with deep litter systems have more flies at them, just because you've got more material for the flies to go into. And we're talking about, turning that litter properly and using like larvicides and things like that. Actually putting those granules into there. I don't know how well that would work.
Yeah. So I mean.
So can we touch base on, and Ross, you actually gave me this as an outline, that there, and I don't know if this is correct, that there are 4 main approaches to control flies. There's chemical control, which would be your insecticides, biological control like wasps and chickens, environmental control, which is removing places to spawn, and then trapping.
Yeah. So what I normally try and teach the guys when I do training and so on is that if you have a problem, let's say you've got a yard and you've got a problem, we start from the outside first. So the traps that you place, and we actually spoke about that as well. So some people say no, you need to put it close. Some people say no, put it far away.
It's always a question.
So what we've seen, especially in the poultry and the pig industry, is you need to put that trap 30 meters away, 20 to 30 meters away from the area that you want to actually protect or keep the flies away from. Because of the fly trap has got a pull of about 30 meters.
Sure, that's quite far.
Yeah, so because of the organic matter, so let's say you use a red top type of product, or you use the buckets, there's buckets on
I
the
like
market
those
as
red
well.
tops because they're cheap as chips, like essentially, like and they seem to work quite well.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, you go to the yard and then you say, hey,
Why is it outside the stable?
yeah, well, no, not even that. You say, well, they say, okay, we have a lot of flies, and I say, well, there's no one way to to control it. And then I say, red tops work quite well. And they said, oh, we got lots of red tops. And then I go and look at the red tops, and A, there's no bait in them, or B,
Or they're dry.
they're dry, exactly, or the little top on the top is off and the rain goes inside. And then the other question they have is, oh, but I don't want to be drawing flies away from, all the neighbors. All the flies are coming from our neighbors to me.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the problem with the high density properties we
Yeah.
have specifically in
But I mean,
Colic.
in the end of the day, you're working in a fixed environment. I mean, your property, like the flies don't care about
How
you.
far can flies fly? Like, what is their
So
territory?
normally between 3 and 5 kilometers,
Seriously? Wow.
but with the wind, the University of Ontario did a study. I don't know how they did the study, but it's 32
They gave them all little
32
fly
kilometers.
passports.
Go on, little
Yeah.
GPS trackers, and there they go.
And
32 kilometers.
flies are the worst. Like, for example, geldings, things that they don't particularly transmit, infectious diseases, but flies transmit all sorts of, fecal matter that they land on. And geldings, you really stress when you do a gelding in the summer because you've got all that blood, and especially an open gelding, the flies go in there, and then that's just infection ready to happen, and on wounds and everything like that. So, I mean, flies.
And also
cause a
just the
hole.
secondary, I think, like when they irritate a wound without it getting infected, the horses rub it.
Yeah, then you get some pride flesh, or the habronema that comes through.
habronema
Habronema
is
is
horrific.
summer sores are the worst, and they just sometimes just don't go away. They're like the most challenging things to treat. So,
And what is that? Where the fly lands,
so
lays?
so the flies have
It's a specific kind of fly, right?
It's your normal house flies,
Okay.
and they all transmit habronema, which is a parasite that is associated with the flies, like a little worm. And then the flies will target it's your tabanids that carry those habronemas, and the flies will then go to like your cutaneous areas on the body, and then the little worms will basically get deposited there, and then they will actually migrate into the tissue. So you see them on the eyes, around the mouth often, and they'll start off as a very small sore, with a well circumscribed small sore, and then it grows rapidly because those eggs and then those parasites actually start. They start proliferating, and you get almost like a proud flesh type of reaction, and it's so difficult to get rid of them.
I remember seeing that, and it was almost like it was hard on the outside, and I tapped it, and then I peeled it off, and I was like, "This is not good."
And you have it on the eyes, on the I've had often on the lips, and then also like with males on like the penis and on the sheath, they get quite bad.
Okay, that's horrific.
And the imports seem to get it worse than. In just what I've seen, the imports seem to be really affected by them as well.
I mean, I think also, like when you speak about the deep litter system, that originated in Europe, where there are just less.
Yeah.
It's just not the climate for these
much
kinds of things.
cooler there, yeah. I mean, you can use a deep litter, so just make sure that you're doing things as like what Neil suggests.
Okay, so we were talking about the control factors.
Yeah. So just something on the fly traps as well that I've seen is that especially like the red top. Most of the liquid, it actually gathers at the bottom. So that needs to be agitated like every second day type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Because don't take your hand. Please learn out of my faults.
Personal experience.
Yeah, your hand will stink for a week.
Okay.
So just take a branch and just at the bottom, just agitate it so it does smell so that it attracts the fly. So it won't attract a fly from 5 kilometers away.
But it's going to pull them in the area.
Something just to keep in mind that we've seen is it would be advantageous if you know what the predominant wind direction is.
Oh, that's interesting.
So what we've done at a few chicken farms is that we place on the border fence from which side the wind comes, and we've placed on the other side as well. So we had a problem, and we actually
You almost intercept them.
yes, yeah, like place a barrier
Okay.
of traps. So
Traps.
that,
Yeah.
that,
How
that
many
works.
traps do you put in place? That's the question. Like, I mean, if you've got a bad fly problem and someone says, "Oh, I've got one trap up, it's not doing anything." Like,
Yeah, it's not gonna.
Do you have to put like a row of them
Yes, yeah,
30 meters
it's
apart?
30
or-
meters
okay.
apart. If you've got like a block type of yard, then one in each corner type of thing, depending on how big the yard is.
Yeah, and where the
So,
stables are.
Yeah, so I
as well.
think rule of thumb 30 meters.
Okay. And how often do those traps need replacing when they fall?
I would say, well, it depends on how much flies you've got, because the flies also they lay the eggs, and the larvae and all that actually starts breeding within that thing, but they can't come out,
okay.
and that also stinks, and so that also attracts. So as soon as it's full, it depends on how many what your fly load is.
And is that an insecticide in there? Is that toxin? No.
No.
So disposing of it,
No.
you just wrap it up and
Yeah,
chuck it away.
yeah.
Okay.
So
it's like a bait system.
yeah. So I'm sorry.
There was a very cool thing at one of the yards they went in, like similar with a bait system, but they said no, the red tops, they got too bad a fly problem. They're going to ramp it up. So they went and took a big bucket and they put some rotting meat at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then, you get those fly zappers, those big commercial ones with the blue light and everything. They put that on top of it, on top of this bucket, right? So now the flies try to get in there and it's just like, but I don't know.
It's like Vietnam gunfire in the back of the.
But yeah, exactly. How to bomb-proof your horse.
Listen, South Africans are just the most inventive
So many
crowd.
interesting
That's
things about
amazing.
that was a good idea, but I just don't know how safe this thing is pivoting over there. But yeah,
Load shedding.
and load
I don't
shedding
know what's
as
going to
well.
happen with that. So, yeah. So that's the first thing that we look at is
Just for immediate relief.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
is your perimeter, and then obviously the biggest thing is your manure, and that's actually something that I want to just stand still a little bit. Is obviously between 3 and 7 days, you've got your whole fly life cycle that's completed within the manure. And then you've got a lot of flies. So with that, we use IGRs, insect growth regulators. So you get Diptera-specific insect growth regulators. So the good doctor will tell you what that means. Diptera-specific means it's species specific. Okay. So if you have stuff like wasps or so on that you're using within your manure, it won't affect the wasps. It will only affect the flies. Yeah.
Okay.
So so that's a very nice thing to use, and quite important as well.
Okay.
I don't think you can.
How often should, and I mean, these big muck heaps, obviously for big stable yards are a problem, but how often should manure be being removed from the properties, especially, and like, I don't want to say specifically Kailami, but we are all living on top of each other here. So,
The best fly control is to have the manure off the farm as soon as possible.
okay.
3
What's
to
the
7
maximum?
days, you say,
Yeah,
is the
3 to
life
7 days. So
The maximum every 3 days it should be being
once
removed.
once a week, I think will
Okay.
will be sufficient. But if it's not feasible to do that quite regularly, the farmers that knows how to make the best manure heap is dairy farmers.
Okay.
And we've done a roadshow with the milk producing organization down in KZN once, and what they do is they do their manure heap. It's nice and high. They pile it as high as possible with the smallest base as possible.
Oh, that's interesting because that's where all the moisture sits.
Yes. So gravity is your friend. So it pulls down all the moisture to about a meter and a half, the base, and you only treat that base with your
That's
larvicide.
amazing.
So a lot of people think, no, I'm going to spread this out.
To try and dry it or
Yes, yeah.
okay.
But flies breed in the first 10 centimeters of manure.
And then you've got lots of 10 centimeters. I
Yeah,
suppose,
so
don't you?
deeper than that, it becomes hot because the composting takes place and so on. So you want your larvicide to be within that 10 centimeters. So there's larvicides.
And can you just put larvicides around the outside of it, or do you need to put it on the base before you build the muck heap?
I think if you build the muck heap, after that you've built it, and you're like, okay, for the next week, won't be able to remove manure, you treat it.
Okay.
And then there afterwards, every second week, so it's a 2-week application.
Okay.
But if it rains, most of your IGRs are water soluble, so it will leach. So after rain, you're going to have to treat again.
Okay. Okay, and I suppose again in Gauteng, where you've got rain sometimes every afternoon for a week, that will.
Yeah, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. I was trying to think. I've just lost my train of thought. The muck heaps, removing that. Environmental control. So, I mean, besides that, sorry, biological control.
Yeah.
Your chickens and your wasps. Are wasps okay to be? Do you put them in the muck heap to help control the larva, or
Yes,
and then
you
what
can.
happens when you remove your muck heap? You wave goodbye to your wasps,
Yes.
and you hope that the nursery who's taking them doesn't sue you when they get stung.
Yeah, so that little wasp is so minute.
Okay.
The size of a fly pupa is probably a rice grain size. So so that little wasp is quite small. The only thing that you need to keep in mind, if you use insecticides at your yard, and you're using wasps, you need to keep those two separate.
Okay.
Okay, so
Those wasps are very cool. They're like parasitic wasps, and they fly through, and they find it at the fly pupa, and then they lay their eggs in the pupa, and then they feed on the pupa. But the thing that you must remember is that one wasp is only going to take out one pupa.
Okay.
So, wasps alone is not going to fix your problem. That's why it's a holistic approach. You need to take all these factors that we're discussing, put them together in a logical manner and say, okay, well, then you will have the best outcome, because this is going to control. And as you said, 80% of the problem is actually in your, in the larval stages.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I find that interesting that we are spending so much on fly spray systems in the stables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any DEET, I was speaking to you earlier about the DEET-based products, that we love, the tabards and the peaceful sleeps,
and that's for midges, not really for flies.
Yeah.
With regards to DEET, also something, it's such an expensive. So Patrick Page did a study on the DEET, and he went and had a whole lot of Midge Traps, and he basically did the study where he wanted to show out of DEET, citronella, and another type of repellent which worked the best. And strangely enough, citronella actually brought
attracted them. Yes,
them.
I've heard this
but
as well.
I think that's also, I spoke to Patrick about it, it's a lot large about the sample size that they used.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say citronella attracts them, just maybe it
But
didn't have any
citronella was
effect.
it was a big winner about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Hey? Everything was.
But DEET works for the midges specifically, but the problem is it's very expensive. So so it's in tabard, the ointment. The tabard spray, though, there's a tabard spray that doesn't have any DEET in it. So you must just look what's in it.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Because I went to the yard and there's tabard spray, and I looked, and there was an insecticide in it. But you must understand the difference between insecticides and repellents.
And what is the difference between an insecticide and a repellent?
So the repellent will just deter the vector. The insecticide will kill the vector.
Okay.
So that's the biggest difference between the two. And the wasps and the IGR themselves, as Ross said, is that only that won't give you the holistic approach that you need. So you need to have some sort of knockdown type of regime as well. And there are very nice products on the market that you can use with the horse within the stable, and it's got no effect whatsoever. So we actually use it quite extensively.
Because a lot of people are worried about dogs.
Yeah.
And the other insects, like you speak about.
Like bees.
Yes, and we're becoming, and I think there's a big, so I would be interested to hear what you would suggest for this, and it does tie in with the whole holistic strategy. But we are becoming a lot more eco-friendly in the horse community.
We want to keep the bees.
We want to keep bees.
Bees
we want to
don't
keep
spread disease.
grasshoppers.
Sorry, that's one thing.
Yeah. We want to keep all the nice things. So how, like insecticides are a very loaded debate with us, because we also want to be kid and dog friendly in case someone goes and licks a wall.
So I think you want like a targeted approach.
Yes, no, for sure. So I think when we do trainings on farms, especially the chickens and the pig farms, we harp on application. Application is key. I mean, we've we've had a client where they've had litter beetle on the farm, on a chicken farm, and they were spending thousands of rands trying to get this under control. And they phoned us. We went there and opened the cupboard, and I phoned my boss. I said, "Listen, we're in trouble." And he said, "Like, why?" "Because all the actives that we've got is in that cupboard." So, and it's not working for them. And so then we said, "Listen, show me how do you apply the product?"
Okay.
And there were certain irregularities regarding that. And as soon as we've corrected them on the correct methods, all of a sudden it started working. So I think the big thing that we need to understand, and the listeners need to understand, is that insecticides, there's no safe insecticide, unfortunately. But I can't see that we can move away from that completely. The amount we use and so on, we can actually govern by management type of things, like manure management, getting it off the yard. Those type of things will actually reduce the amount of insecticides that you use. But as Ross said, that the targeted approach where you use it, so you're not going to be willy-nilly put it in a firefighter and spray your whole garden with it, type of thing. So you need to identify where's your problems, where do the flies congregate, and you focus on those areas with the applications of insecticides.
But like, I think there's so many different insects that we need to have a look at also. I mean, there's the flies, and like, things that will work for flies are not going to work for midges, and the same thing is not necessarily going to work for mosquitoes. So with regards to diseases, every single insect is transmitting a different type of disease that you want to avoid. And like with regards to flies, your Habronema. With regards to your midges, it's your AHS and your EEV. And with regards to your mosquitoes, your West Nile virus and your other orboviruses, those weird neurological ones. So I think, in top of having a holistic approach just for your flies, you need to integrate all your other, aspects in there as well. So, it becomes quite difficult, I think, and I have a lot of sympathy for yard owners to try and get this under wraps, because with that exponential growth as we spoke about, and bringing up that 80% that's in the earth, people only really start stressing about the flies when they're visually there. When you walk into that yard and especially white walls, and you see them all over the wall, and you walk in there and they rise up, and then
think you're under a beehive.
And then these poor people, they say, "What can we do?" They ask me, and I say, "Well, this is what other people have done." But at that point, it's almost too late. You need to start getting control of it now, and start sorting it out before that population grows and you have that 80%.
I think to be proactive is actually quite key, because as soon as you've got the problem, it takes a lot of money to sort out the problem. And I think, but luckily, regarding flies, midges, and mosquitoes, there are some products that actually insecticides that take out all of those at once. And it's a nice it's products that you spray on the wall, and it's got a residual. Okay. And so it's a targeted approach. You know where you're putting it.
So what's the active in those? Is it like, because I always say Beta-Core. We always used to spray Beta-Core on the horses, which is your pyrethroid, right?
Yes.
Interestingly, Beta-Core pyrethroids are toxic to horses. Yeah, but I mean,
I don't care. Someone's going to die. It's us or the flies.
But it works well because you're only spraying it on certain areas. You're not using too much. A horse is a large animal, and like you said, it's about the dose. So I mean, you can use a small amount, and it's not going to cause any toxic effects. But I mean, cats are also susceptible. So you don't want to go and spray your cat with Beta-Core.
Yeah. So I mean, an active that works very well, specifically on walls and so on. Because I know a lot of the yards, the walls are not plastered; they're sometimes brick.
Those breeze blocks.
So and I mean, that's something that you also need to keep in mind. Is if you've got a coarse surface and you spray a SE that's a super concentrate or emulsifiable concentrate that is a liquid as origin, sometimes 50% of the active pulls into the wall because it's coarse. So you would actually want to use something that's like a wettable powder that sits on the outside
That's
of the wall,
interesting, Neil.
so that more of the active is available to kill the vector. So a very nice active to use is a deltamethrin, because they call it a highly excitable pyrethroid. So if you take, let's say, diluted deltamethrin and a cypermethrin, and you actually put a drop on your arm of each, the deltamethrin will start burning quicker than the cypermethrin, because you've got that highly excitable pyrethroid. Because like Beta is also a pyrethroid. So yes, there's so much to talk about.
I'm just fascinated listening to
But
this
what
because
stops them? Everyone says, okay, what's this? You put it on the wall, and they said, no, but they don't want the horses licking the wall. So I'm like, well, then don't put it on the walls next to your stable, or I suppose, I mean, a horse licking wall is not going to
put it above the. I would imagine also above the.
So that type of product is actually used within pig farms. And I mean that little piggies, they
lick everything.
They lick everything.
Yeah. So it's actually quite safe.
So as soon as the product is dry, it's actually very,
it's
very
about
safe.
having, like you say, what's, and I don't think, in my years being in and out of stable yards, that I've ever heard someone, because a lot of yards also have a brick stable and a wood stable, and they're treating them the same, which is a really interesting consideration, that they've effectively halved the value in the one stable block.
Yeah. So I think another thing is that we need to keep in mind as well that certain products fall in certain groups of actives. So that's why I said there's so much to talk about, because you need to shuttle your products as well, because you can't use the same thing for the next 5 to 10 years.
Resistance,
because you get resistance and all those type of things.
And I'm sure people land with a product they really like, and then they commit to it for 3 years. And
I mean, there was a animal health company that had a product that was a bait, and it was a organophosphate bait. So then obviously in Europe they banned organophosphate, and they brought out a new product, and
a carbonate, just worse.
No, it's actually neonicotinoid. So and it hit the South African market, and farmers were in uproar. They would say, this is the biggest load of nonsense that you could have brought out. But if you ask the farmers now, it's probably one of the best products on the market. But it's just because they didn't understand the mode of action. They didn't understand in which group that certain product fell. So
it's good to hear there's change resistance in all elements of the world, even with pig farmers. It's not just like the anti-vaxxers or people in corporates who hate change. It's everyone.
Yeah. So that's something that.
What about those? So like there's the traps. So the beta traps. Yeah. There's the chemicals that you can spray on the animals themselves, like Beta-Col. There's the repellents that you can spray on. The repellents, make sure if you're going to go for midges, it must have DEET. Then there's the wasps, right?
Chickens. Chickens are quite a loaded thing. So I've got a lot of clients who say that. Well, the complaint is I had one client who bought 20, and she says they bought the flies. They brought the flies. They didn't have this many flies. Now they've got flies.
Yeah.
They might also bought them in September.
Did they have 40 chickens in 3 square meter space?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
should chickens work? Like, are they?
I've seen that chickens work on a feedlot, skropoenertjies, because they scratch and they eat the maggots and all those type of things. So I don't want to say that they didn't bring the flies. I don't want to offend anybody, but it's unlikely. It depends on how, as you said, how many chickens in which type of area. But
then do you have to be careful, like if you're using a larvicide, do you have to be careful about the chickens eating the larva?
No.
That's great.
So because it's Diptera specific, so so it only kills the fly larvae. So most of your IGRs, your insect growth regulators, are all chitin inhibitors, or it disrupts the production of chitin. So chitin is a substance that makes up the physical structure of the larvae, as well, the exoskeleton, as well as the pupa and so on. So there's nothing that you can do towards the eggs. Okay. If you don't use wasps, there's nothing that you can do against pupa. So the only place that you can actually control a certain vector is with adulticides or larvicides. So it stops the life cycle moving to the next stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does and this was also just a very popular product a few years ago, Diatomaceous Earth. Where does that fall in? Is it chemical control? People were fanatical about scraping up the beds, laying this down, putting it down, feeding it to their horses, putting it on the muck heaps.
To be quite honest, I don't have a lot of experience with products like that. I think it could definitely help with the absorption of moisture.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they've put it before they put down the bedding.
Because diatomaceous is like clay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think something like that, if you have a manure heap and you know that, listen, after that you've treated with your IGR, and it rains and stuff like that, you can use it just to dry up a little bit
It's
of
a
moisture.
good binding agent. You can use it in diarrhea as well. It works quite well, like to the horse with
feed the
colitis.
horse or okay.
Yeah, so it's a good binding agent, but as an actual mechanism of action, as an antiparasitic, I don't think there's anything really like specific. Maybe it has an environmental effect to it, but people do like to use it, and it's cheap. So what about those
tapes?
Tapes, yeah, the tapes.
You see, it works well.
Yeah.
It's
just a roll then.
Yeah. So
taking them down is just terrible.
Yeah. So it's a one-hit wonder type of thing. So you put it up. If it's full, you take it and you toss it away. But in sensitive areas, it does work very well.
Okay.
Where you're not allowed to use insecticides and those type of things.
I found the tapes, like people put the tapes up and then they get like covered in flies within a day, and then they'll have to replace them, and they said, and then the flies are back. And I think that goes back to what you said. 80% of them are still on the ground. Yeah. And then, I mean, if you're not treating all the different life stages and trying all the different environmental areas and attacking them, then you're just throwing money at nothing.
Unfortunately,
throwing it against the wall.
Yeah.
So Neil, you come into a yard.
Yes.
You're coming in. What is the order that you would tackle things in? You would go and put up the bait bags.
Okay. So firstly, I would say the yard owner, just take me to the place where you've got the most flies. Where do they congregate and stuff? So that'll tell you a lot about what's happening on the farm.
It's funny because I think you might find a lot of yard owners take you to the feed room because that's where the yard owners hang out, not at the muck heap, which is where they should hang out maybe.
Yeah, and probably the kitchens. But so I think the biggest thing that I go and look at first is what is happening with their manure, because I mean that's 80% of it. So what are you doing with your manure? What does the bedding look like within the stables? All right. And then I'll ask them, what are you currently using for fly control? Then they'll tell me, listen, A, B, C, and so on. Then I would ask them, listen, what other farms or what other animals are in the vicinity close to you? So that's
interesting. We often don't think about our neighbors.
Yeah, because that gives you an idea from if are the flies coming from somewhere or not. Where do I put my fly traps? How many do I put down? So that type of thing. A lot of people don't know. So then you put your fly traps, and you'll see which fly traps fills up first. Then you know, okay, predominantly that's the area that it might come from. If it's not breeding on your yard. So after that, then I'll ask them, listen, what you're using, and then they'll show me, and then I'll say, listen, show me how do you use it, because it's all about application.
That's true. What are you using and how are you using it?
Yeah. And
I had a friend who ate a suppository once, and the doctor was like, she says these anti-inflammatories just aren't working, and
You
he was
sure
like,
this was a friend?
and she said, and she said, and he said, and she says, and it just didn't taste very nice at all, and he was like, oh, no, like that's not what it was. That's not what it was for. And she still said, like, I can never go back there again, you know?
No, for sure. So,
But everyone must work together, because I can imagine, like, let's say, you want to go through at least 5 cycles or so before you can, let's say you see, okay, there's a massive explosion of flies. Now you're seeing the 20%. You can assume that there's 80% still in the ground, right? So like 4 more cycles
Bad days are
through,
coming.
right?
Yeah.
Bad days are coming. So then you want to start hitting it hard from your side. So then you'll do the baits and the fly spray and
Change the
everything.
muck heap.
The muck heap.
Yeah.
But I mean, you still got your neighbors, you know, so you need to speak to, the surrounding, get everyone involved. Everyone should be involved. Otherwise you're just kind of fighting it yourself.
Yeah.
And then you need to, even if the flies are gone, you need to still apply all of those things, otherwise because
Stay on top of it through winter.
yeah. So,
Well-
and I think one of the things that actually depresses a lot of yard owners is like, listen, there's no breeding on my at my stables. We take out the muck, we transport it somewhere, maybe to Denny Mushroom Farm, I don't know. But we still have loads of flies.
Yeah.
And I think that is quite disheartening for some.
Often,
Again, I've had clients who, like, they methodically collect all of the manure and they take it to the track across the road and put it on the track. You know, and I think that's, we also tend to have, especially in high density areas, we have a little bit of an out of sight, out of mind approach.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that a fly can fly 5 kilometers is quite humbling, because you go, oh, okay, well that's how far out of, not my house, our neighborhood, we need to be
And I mean, we
moving.
I stay in Pretoria, and we're in quite a big residential area, so there's no farm animals quite close to our house. And I mean, listen, if my little mini schnauzer does its business, listen, it's like, so that just shows you that they do travel quite extensively.
But I mean, if you took the manure and I like the idea of treating the manure, and adding aspects to that, larvicides and things like that. So before you go and spread it, would it be safe to? Yeah, because it's specific.
Because
It's a good idea.
the larvicide, that is, you get one that you actually, because a chicken is a monogastric animal, so you put larvicide in the feed. So they eat the feed, the larvicide's in the stomach, and it gets excreted. So the larvicide is already
pre-built in.
Yeah, within the manure. Unfortunately, it's only registered for monogastrics. Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I
Cows
could
and
just die.
Chickens that you have, you can feed it to them. And it's such a good idea.
Yeah. So, but I mean,
Then you can't blame the chickens.
you
You
see,
see.
method to the madness. So, but a lot of chicken farmers sell their chicken manure to cattle farmers, and then they feed it to the cattle.
And then the horse owners buy the cattle poop to put on the rose bushes, which are up the road from the.
So it just shows you that the larvicides that you get is safe.
So safe.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's Diptera specific. So it's got no effect on the cattle whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just do want to say to the people who are watching, if you have any questions for lovely Neil or lovely Ross, please pop your questions into the live chat on the right-hand side there. So the biggest thing that I am taking away from this is that the first thing people should tackle is their muck heaps.
Yeah.
And then probably their stables.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also
So
to keep on it, like maybe even during winter, have some fly traps up. And
yeah, and I mean, your frequency of applying, let's say, adulticides or insecticides will obviously become less within the winter. Okay. It might become less within the summer as well, as soon as you've sorted out maybe a few management things.
Okay.
So if you've got a problem, there's going to be quite a extensive program that you're going to.
If people are going to commit to an intensive program, is there a way to, obviously with summer when the heat and the rains come, you have to be on top of it anyway.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to have a preemptive strike? I suppose August is the time to do it, where you would really try and
Yeah, I would say
decimate your
middle
monkey
August,
bin.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can properties that are close to water do? Because I mean that's also a prime area for midges and mosquitoes.
Yeah, so that's where something like a wettable powder type of product on the walls works quite well, because the wettable powder is also more robust against things that break down actives. I don't know if a lot of the listeners know, but stuff like UV light breaks down actives, obviously rain and dust as well. So dusts actually cover the product. So if you spray,
It's quite a hostile environment.
yeah,
horses
especially well in Africa. So,
Africa's a hostile environment. I like that.
But with the midges, it's almost, I find that it's very difficult to control them in the environment because they're around the water, you know, and unless you start throwing like DDT into the water, which obviously you don't do, you know, then it's very difficult to control them. Or I've heard a lot of people draining, you know, the water and actually,
Don't buy a property by water.
Yeah, but I mean, people actually have gone and drained the water. And with regards to the midges, and AHS, it's interesting because you'll see that it will start off in like Pretoria North, that area around there, because actually that's where, like in the 1890s, where Arnold Tyler came from the UK, like that's actually where he set up base at Onderstepoort to study the diseases there, and that's where he found you know, AHS and rinderpest, which he managed to get rid of rinderpest, so there's still hope for AHS. You know, and what you'll find on the maps, because when the diseases come out and they report the epidemiology maps, you start seeing it. It starts moving from that area, then going like through Hearties, then it starts coming up. And then you can actually plot it and you can see, okay, this area is going to get hit next. So, and that's all with the rain and the water, because it's a lot, you know, warmer down there and a lot more water. So it's completely environmental. And with your midges, to me, what's important is keeping your horses away from those high risk times during the day, like your dusk and your dawn, because that's when the temperature goes low and that's where the midges come out.
So control the environment as much as you can.
Yeah, that's where you're controlling your animals in the environment. So, you know, with the midges, putting on your DEET, and remember DEET is a repellent, so you can also put on an insecticide over that as well.
And I suppose fans
like
and
Betaprol.
shields are the big
fans to obviously with that wind movement, the midges get affected, and then the shields, like putting screens on your
shade nets.
But you can spray those shade nets down, hey, with maybe something a bit more effective.
Do you remember the I don't know if it's a mosquito machine. It was you know, I feel like it was sold to horse communities as a midge magnet. I think that might actually be what the name was, midge, and it was a machine that you had to put like 40 meters away from the stable block.
Yeah.
And you turned it on. I think it was gas, and it actually was meant to attract, and then you would have to empty out the bag of midges.
Well, the midges
every afternoon.
Are cool because like the way that you study them is you put these midge traps up, and they found that the midge traps are the midges go towards like shapes. So they put these.
Is it a horse shape?
It's like it looks like a large animal shape, like a cow or horse or whatever, and then they attract it to that and the CO2. So it's very like shape orientated as well. You know, they kind of target those large shapes.
That's the CO2 that attracts the carbon dioxide.
That and also some ticks are also. So ticks, you get predator ticks.
Those flying ticks.
The flying ticks. But I mean, you get predator ticks that actually are attracted to CO2. So you can take a CO2 block, like a dry ice block, and you can put it in the felt, and you'll see that some ticks will start coming towards it. It's cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
A question from Alison Hawke, who says, would covering the manure heap in black plastic to heat it up help to reduce the flies?
Definitely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the big thing with that is that I've seen is when the wind comes, it blows it off.
Okay.
And then it's left, and then rain comes, and then it's a big mess. So if you can keep your hand on it, and you can actually cover it nicely with bricks on the end and all those type of things, then it could definitely
that's interesting.
work. What we've seen that also works sometimes is that because sometimes if you cover it and you've got a lot of flies, then a client or two of mine have sprayed the plastic with the insecticide. So if they come and sit on the plastic, then it controls them as well. So, but to turn up the heat definitely works, yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
But like you have to be on it. You know,
Yes,
you can't
yeah.
expect a result and be like, oh, I sprayed some stuff, and you know, I think you have to be on it constantly. And I think again, like you know, what you said hit home. Like you, even if you get rid of the adults, you still need to be on it because you're gonna hit the next wave coming through. And then like with mosquitoes, with the midges, you know, the mosquitoes, a lot of people take those mosquito coils.
Yes.
And then at night, especially like high, you know, when you're really in the horse sickness, you know, time and you get a lot of vectors around, and they basically have those coils burning in the.
I've also heard, you know, it's also a bit of a fire risk, you know, in certain.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, it's choose your poison, literally. You know, like what's going to happen.
But I think with the midges at night, then you kind of want to close in them, and you know, make sure that you're trying to keep your animals away from those midges, and it's those cooler times. Whereas the flies are kind of constantly through the day.
Yeah. So they'll be most active here from 10 o'clock, half past 10ish. Then midday they energize. And then
when everyone's at their most frustrated and hot and tired.
So if you want to apply adulticides for fly control, late afternoon, early morning's best time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, let me just check. Okay, I thought that was another question. So a holistic strategy. If people go and they do follow this and they get the right product, they apply it correctly to the correct surface, and they're following a holistic strategy.
Yeah.
How long would it take for them to, and as you say, Ross, that they're on it, how long would it take for them, if they were committed, to see a difference in their flies?
I would say 2 weeks.
Really? That little? That's amazing.
Yeah. So it also depends on what's happening in your area as well, because you get people that just don't. Not bothered, you know.
And I think this is a frustrating point. Like, I know we spoke about it, but, you know, if you want you know, the property, you need to do your part, because you can't expect
the community.
And like, even if you know, a lot of people complain because say they're situated next to a large stable yard and they blame the stable yard, you know, everyone needs to kind of be part of the solution, you know. So I think that's, if more and more people got together and they followed the same holistic strategy, I think your outcome would logically.
No, for sure. And I think one of the biggest things is if everybody, and I'm saying this with the biggest respect, just are a little bit more educated about
Absolutely.
About not that I'm thinking that they're dumb or something. I'm just saying to be more educated about stuff like fly life cycle. How does it work? When to do what?
You saying that, you know, we're spending 80% of our resources tackling 20% of that's just such a great visualization for me. That really does. You go, that's totally, you know, we should all just live with the 20% for 2 weeks while we tackle the 80%, surely.
Yeah.
You know?
And it answers questions why a lot of things just don't. I mean, like, for example, the tapes will work for the adults, you know, but it's not going to solve your problem. And it's not like you shouldn't put tape up. You should use that in conjunction with other things, like the wasps. So at North Rand, we use those wasps and often go to get those wasps. And, you know, where you place them is also important. And I mean, wasps alone are not going to fix your problem. But it's a nice add-in, you know, if each one's doing 20%, eventually you're going to get 100%.
Marginal gains.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something just to keep in mind, it might sound menial, but just around, not specifically the stables, but at your house, just make sure that your dustbin's lid is not a little bit open type of thing. Things like that. Don't have an open dustbin, because you get some places that's got open dustbin and you put all your food and stuff like that in there that you're throwing away. That also attracts.
And people who, after COVID, there was this boom of backyard vegetable gardeners, you know, and then they've got a compost heap 10 meters outside, and they go, I don't understand why I've got flies in the kitchen.
But there seems to be like a good way to compost. like you said, that the dairy farmers are really good at composting because there's a technique to it almost, to effectively compost.
Compost in a certain way, but I think it's more for fly control.
Okay.
Having the almost like pyramid type of style.
Okay.
So do you get more heat then coming from the bottom because you've got more pressure, more density coming down? So that also makes sense.
I think the biggest thing is just the gravity pulling the moisture down to
a small
to the
base.
bottom, so that you don't treat your whole heap, only the bottom part of it. So there you save on active costs.
Well, we were talking another disease way of controlling like midges and mosquitoes is you often see in yards they've got this water system, this very fine mist sprayer.
Yes.
And I've seen it work quite well where it does cool down the horses, and it's also really nice to sit on a really hot day. But then you add your repellents to that.
Yes.
And then it gets like a really nice smell, and then but
citronella.
Yeah, or whatever, or put some DEET in there. But what was actually interesting, we're discussing that can also compound the effect if it wets your bedding, in the surrounding areas.
This moist,
Yeah.
humid
So if the nozzle is not fine enough, and it's more almost like a sprayer type of droplet,
and they get clogged up quickly.
Yeah.
You find.
So that might wet the bedding and actually cause a wet spot where breeding starts, and you might not even know it.
It's so complex because then you're fixing your problems with your midges, but now you're creating an issue unknowingly with your flies, and you just have good intentions. And I think that's the whole thing, is that sometimes we do things with good intent, but we actually just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Well, like you say, you might you win on one thing and you lose on another, and I think that's constantly, it's a state of evolution. But I think, as you said, you cannot take your finger off of it. And I think a lot of the time we kind of go, well, I've sorted out this problem, and something else takes your attention, and
then people get frustrated, and then they give up, and they're like, oh well,
Totally.
let's just leave the flies.
Nothing works.
Yes,
All
that's
the
exactly
products are bad.
yeah.
I'm just not going to do
And
anything.
then you see your diseases coming through, then you see your EVs, your AHS, and all of that stuff. So, I mean, it's definitely warranted not to control your population of insects, because, I mean, nothing good can really come of it if you have all these flies and insects going around. They're just going to spread disease.
But, even you were talking about, properties near water, and it was an interesting thing. Moritz Fontaine stud, the thoroughbred stud, they specifically chose to be in the Karoo for all of those reasons, Yeah. It was...
or even like other parasites though that are not flying, like gastrodiscus and things like that. I mean, you need a snail to... And you see that through like having flays around. So controlling water in your areas is very
It's a massive thing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else either of you would like to add to that? I think the holistic approach is something that I personally have really taken away from that. I think that's, and to ignore the 20%, focus on the 80%.
Yeah, I think there's no silver bullet when it comes to pest control. I think something that we need to just understand is that you can control the load, but you won't get it totally eradicated. You'll always have flies. On some of the big farms, there'll always be rats, type of thing. But the amount you can control. And I think if you, as I said earlier, just read up a little bit, those type of things on controlling certain vectors, I think it'll help quite a lot.
I see all these like different types of fancy, catch like traps and stuff coming through. I mean, is there one trap that is so much better than the other one, or is there a specific system that works best?
The traps that work regarding UV light works very well, because a fly is actually attracted to UV light. So that's why you get those fly traps within the restaurants and so on, and you see it's like a purpley type of light.
It attracts a lot of bugs, though, doesn't it?
Okay. It does, yeah.
Okay.
And then so those type of traps is quite
so
quite
would you just keep those on during the day for flies and then turn them off at night, or you keep them on just the whole time? Because they'll take the midges. Will the midges be attracted to those as well, I suppose? Yeah,
I
and
think
mosquitoes as well. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that the the day part, keeping them on in the day is quite important.
Okay.
Because you get two types. You get one that's the zapper that actually like hears like tuck, tuck, tuck,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you get the one with that actually catches. So it's like a glue board. So it goes towards the light and it actually sticks to the glue board.
Okay.
So most restaurants and so on use that one because you don't want to have a clap and
Don't wanna
let
have
all the
people-
But
juice
it's so
everywhere. So-
satisfying when you hear those
Have
zaps and
you
you're like,
seen those tennis rackets, the electrified
Yeah.
tennis rackets? There was a violent debate on my Facebook feed when I was trying to find a pest control expert. And I think, I can't remember who it was who was tagged. And there was, I came back 48 comments later and everyone was talking about how much they loved the tennis racket.
Oh, the
I was
tennis
saying,
rackets
okay,
are
guys,
cool.
we can't use that
They
at
just
yards.
don't last very long though. And there was also another cool thing. Have you seen the salt gun?
No.
You haven't
Yes.
seen the
Yeah,
salt
that's-
guns are super
that's
cool.
brilliant.
They're like someone's brought them in, and they're basically these little toy guns that you put salt in them, and then I think it's air powered. You like pump them or something, and then they even got like a
You
little
shoot the
laser on
fly.
them, and you shoot the flies. Yeah, like I mean, I don't know how effective is the fly control, but it's definitely
Okay,
a boredom buster.
satisfying.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you're sitting in the clubhouse and you know
Yeah.
you.
But
There
I
you
have
go.
to say, my opa, he loves his little racket there.
Oh, you see.
The racket's
So,
cool.
so you see him like,
Just don't want to hit
But
the
it's the
horse
sound,
with the
like you
racket.
say.
yeah.
The sound is the most, the whoppa.
I,
You know,
I,
that's-
I like the running commentary while he's doing it.
You'll have
brilliant.
to. I think that'll be a podcast add-on. We'll have to give them a sound system, please. I want to hear Opa chasing the flies with a tennis racket.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for
tonight,
having
both
us.
of you. That's Neil Laubscher and Dr. Ross Hendry, our experts for this evening on how you can get rid of flies. If you've just caught the tail end of it, I recommend you rewatch it and make sure that you say goodbye to the mental stress as well as the physical stress of having flies in your yard this summer. We'll see you next week. That is every Wednesday rather at 7:00 here on the SAEF podcast from the horse's mouth. My name's Georgie Roberts, and thanks for joining us tonight.